So my question is, can this tiny pedal replace this big boy over here, my Vox AC15? That's what we're gonna find out today. Sup, bud? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you've been doing well. I've been doing pretty well. Also, it's almost Easter, so happy Easter. Over here at my church, we're working pretty hard for the big day, and I thought, what better time to try out a brand new pedal than on Easter. Now, I know this channel is typically dedicated towards production and video production, and don't worry, because we still will be focusing on that. In fact, the next video I'm gonna make is about audio and how you can get the best audio for your production and film. But I thought we'd take a bit of a detour on that because I have this new pedal. I really wanted to try it out and make a video on it. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. As much as I know that we love to collect gear and we think the gear is going to make us better, I also don't want to be the guy that encourages people to just buy more gear. Now, I think all of us kind of suffer a little bit with gas. Not that way. Some of us are lactose, but that's another story. No, I mean that we love the idea of gear and we love the idea of purchasing gear often more than practicing the craft that the gear is for. For me, not only do I appreciate camera and production, but I'm also plagued with liking music, which means I'm hit with a double whammy of you have no money at all ever. But I think for most of us, there is that one piece of gear that we look at and we're just so excited about. It's such an interesting concept to us. Or maybe we just like the way it looks. Maybe it really does check all the boxes, but for one reason or another, we just can't afford it. Or maybe it's not in our local shops. For me, that was the Simplifier DLX. It wasn't available in my local guitar shops, and I didn't really want to go through the hassle of purchasing it online just to ship it back if I really didn't want it. A few days later, I was walking around my local music shop, and I go to the used pedal section, which is, by the way, the best place to go. I think I only bought one pedal new, and it was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Anyway, so I go back to the used pedal, which is all the way in the back of the store, and I'm glancing around, and something catches my eye. I see a black box with a gold penguin on it, and I instantly knew that that's the Simplifier DLX. It's behind a glass cabinet, and I'm kind of looking around trying to get a price on it, but there's no price on it, but there is a sticker on the side that verifies that I was right. It's the Simplifier DLX. And I asked the guy at the counter, I said, hey, how much for this? He picks it up, and he rings it out in the cash just so he can sort of see the price. And when he scans it, to my shock, it's half price. In fact, it's more than half off. And a deal like that, it's really hard to say no. And he's looking at this though, and he can't even figure out what it is. And so while he's scanning it, I'm explaining to him, oh, it's a Simplifier DLX. It's an analog amp and cab sim model. It can emulate a Fender, a Vox, and a Marshall. It's got all these crazy controls on it. Plus, it has a digital reverb on it. And the guy's kind of excited about it. He's like, wow, that's cool. So naturally, of course, I asked, hey, I gotta try this thing out. Can I plug it in? And of course, the guy said, sure. We plugged it into an amp and away I went. Now, side note, as I was playing, I'm really sorry to the guy next to me in the guitar shop. I'm very certain he wanted to play with me. As I was playing around, just really testing the tone out to see what I can get out of it. He was trying to play with me. He sat pretty close to me, and it was clear that he was copying my licks in a playful way, trying to get a bit of a jam going. I was just not having it. I'm extremely shy to play my guitar, just kind of freebie like that, especially in a guitar shop that I don't know anybody. It feels like you're kind of putting on a show in the middle of a shop. So I'm very self-conscious about that. So I just intently stared at this unit, fiddling with the knobs, strumming a few chords, because I desperately didn't want to show this guy that I wanted to play with him. But I was also way too awkward to say, hey man, I appreciate it, but I'm just here to test the pedal. So yeah, sorry to you, bud. That was my bad. But after I finished playing, I knew I wanted to do more with this pedal, to take it home and test it against my amp, the Vox AC15, to see, could this thing really be the amp killer? Few people have had their eyes on this pedal so far, and I needed to bring this thing home or I was gonna lose it. This was my last opportunity to try this pedal. So I had a very long conversation on the phone with a bank, which led almost nowhere. And finally, I had a very short conversation with a loan shark who very lovingly gave me the funds necessary to purchase this pedal. So I present to you the Simplifier. As a side note, I did purchase it with my own money. There is no sponsorship. All opinion is my own. DSM Humboldt doesn't even know I exist. So everything you're going to hear and see is completely my own perspective on it. Now, a lot of people love this pedal because, as I mentioned before, it's an all analog pedal. Well, it's not actually all analog. There is a digital reverb in here. But aside from that, this is completely analog. And there's a lot of people that love analog and they go, see, it's great. It's perfect. Analog is better than digital. And to that I go, look, I don't care. Whether or not it's analog or digital, it doesn't matter to me at all. As long as it sounds good, I don't care if it's analog, digital, or some other hybrid between the two. All that matters is that it sounds good. So while I'm not super interested on the analog aspect of it, I am really interested in what it's capable of, because I'm gonna go through this, and there's some really cool things that no other amp sim on the market has. The Simplifier comes with 3 voicing. It comes with a AC Brit style, which is the Vox, one we're gonna be using today. But it also comes with an American style, that's like a Fender amp. And then finally, an MS Brit. So that's your Marshall Plexi sort of sound. I wanna put it right up here. Will it fall? Oh, I can put it like this. It's upside down, but you get it. Now, the name Simplifier is very clearly just putting together simple and amplifier, and you get Simplifier. The only problem with that is, well, most people, when they look over at this monstrosity of knobs and switches, it doesn't look very simple to them. And to be fair, they're kind of right. I couldn't even find a proper face to lean this thing up so it doesn't fall over. There's so many little toggles and switches and jacks. They packed a lot on that board. But I'm someone that was trained on an analog soundboard. So to me, having a lot of knobs really doesn't scare me that much. Actually, I kind of prefer it because I can see everything in front of me right now. I own a few digital pedals that we're gonna see in a little bit, and digital pedals are great. I love them. But going through the menu to try to find 1 or 2 little small things is a little bit more cumbersome. Even though this does look very daunting, and to somebody who is new to this, it can be very challenging. I really do think that this is a better way than setting it up between endless pages of menu. As someone that just wants to play it and set it and forget it, I don't really need all those pages of menu to really tweak the sound, and this does more than I need. Okay, now going over the knobs is actually not that bad. The top right knob, that's our master volume. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then after that, we have our 3-band EQ. Now, while playing with this in the store, I got really confused at the 3-band EQ because it goes treble middle bass as opposed to bass middle treble, which is how everyone else does it. But for some reason, the Simplifier does things backwards, and this is going to be a common theme on the pedal. For some reason, they decided to invert a lot of things or put them in the wrong order, and EQ is kind of a little bit of a foreshadowing of this. To the right of that, we have our little toggle switch. This is going to toggle between the voicings of the amp. The toggle all the way up is going to be AC Brit. That's going to be our Vox setting. The middle toggle is American. That's going to be our Fender. And the bottom toggle is an MC Brit, or we can call it a Marshall. Again, I don't know why they did it this way. Usually, you'd want to go in sort of ascending or descending distortion. Fender is usually seen as a nice, clean, squeaky tone, so I'd put that on top. Voxes usually like to be played on edge of breakup, so they go right in the middle, and then Marshall goes right on the bottom. A lot of other pedals do it this way. In fact, as far as I know, every other pedal does it this way. But Decent Humbled, I guess, just wanted to be different, and they did it in a completely different way. I don't know why they chose to do that way, but it is something to consider when you're operating this pedal. Make sure you read all the labels so that you know which knob does what. Directly next to the voicing, we have, of course, the gain. That's pretty self-explanatory. And next to the gain, we have the clipping settings. Again, they seem inverted. The top one is lead, the middle section is clean, and the bottom is crunch. Doesn't make any sense to me. Wouldn't you want to go in ascending or descending order of distortion? In other words, maybe you want to do clean crunch lead, or lead crunch clean. But for some reason, they decided not to do that, and they chose to invert it. Moving down to the bottom row, we have our mic position. Now, this is really cool. As we twist it clockwise, it's going to position it more towards the cone, giving us a brighter sound. If we turn it counterclockwise, it's going to give us a darker sound as it puts the microphone off axis. Next, we have the cab sim. And again, it seems backwards or inverted. The toggle on the up position is a combo, which is a single speaker, much the same as I have here. The middle one is a stack that has 4 speakers in it, 4x12. And the bottom one is a twin, which, as you guessed it, has 2. So I don't really understand why they didn't do that in a proper order as 1, 2, 4, or 4, 2, 1. I don't know why they decided to make it 1, 4, 2. It's just out of order backwards and is needlessly complicated for the sake of it. Next to that is the presence knob. Then we have the power tube section, and again, I have to gripe on this because I just don't understand their thinking with it. If you have the toggle in the top position, it's a KT88. Now, it's supposed to emulate a Marshall power tube, but the toggle for the amp voicing, if you want a Marshall, is all the way down. And it's the same with Vox. Vox for the voicing in the amplifier is all the way up on the top toggle. Yet for the power tube section, it's in the middle. It would have made so much more sense if they paired everything together. If you put them all in the middle, you get the Fender sound with the Fender speaker and the Fender power tubes. I don't really know why they chose to do it this way. That's very inverted and very complicated, really just needlessly making this pedal more complicated than what it needs to be. But again, that's what they chose to do. And then after that is really cool because the only thing that's digital on the amplifier, and that's the amount of reverb that's being sent into the signal. The only problem is no amp has ether, room, or plate in them, like at all. So Fender and Vox, this Vox included, has a built-in spring reverb. This is a digital part of the pedal, the only digital part. I don't know why they couldn't choose to put in a digital spring sound. It's not like you have to put a real spring in there. Again, it's just weird that they didn't put in a proper spring reverb on something that's supposed to emulate amps And the real amps have spring reverb in them. It's kind of one of those weird things that I don't quite get it. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing going over them. There are 2 rows, so everything we talked about, just double it, and that works for amplifier B or the less gain version of it. Now, there's a ton of connections that I'm not really going to go through here. We have a right and left out 1/4 inch. We have a headphone jack. We have send and returns for both the stereo settings. But the most impressive thing about this pedal, in my opinion, is the balanced XLRs out. I have no clue why manufacturers aren't producing amp sim pedals with XLR outs. Anything that's just an amp in Cab Sim Simulator, none of them have just basic XLR outs, which completely baffles me because these companies expect us to take a 1/4 inch, plug it into a DI, plug it into an XLR, and then finally we can plug it in front of house. But with this unit, all I have to do is take a single XLR, or 2 if I'm running stereo, and plug them directly into the snake. And if we can use less things in our setup and in our gear, that means there's less chance of something going wrong. So the fact that this has a balanced XLR that can go straight into the system, that is incredible. Okay, so enough talking about the pedal. Let's hear how it sounds. Now for the sound test, I have my trusty SE24 Custom. I love this thing. From the guitar, we're going to go straight into my Boss ES8 switcher, of which I'm going to have a few pedals that we're going to throw in and out. Pretty easy, just some overdrive, delay, and reverb. With the overdrive, I'm going to be using my OCD. With delay, I'm going to be using my Timeline. And with reverb, I'm going to be using the Boss RV5, which is a great ethereal sounding little cheap reverb you can pick up. Now the ES8 is going to have 2 outputs. One's going to go to the Vox, one's going to go to the Simplifier. If it goes to the Vox, it's going to go straight into the top boost of the amplifier. That's my favorite setting on it. From that, an SM57 is going to pick it up and send it into a Scarlett 2i2 interface, which is going to be plugged into my Mac and run on GarageBand where it's going to be recorded. If it goes in the Simplifier, then the 1/4 inch is going to come out, plug directly into the Simplifier, and then XLR out into my interface, again into Mac, into the GarageBand. Okay, really quickly, I just want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's tone tests. See, because we've already said that the amplifier is the gold standard and the Simplifier has to copy it, any differences between the two will be noted as being better for the amp and worse for the Simplifier. But in reality, it could just be they're different. So when we listen to these tests, I want you to keep that in mind, that just because something might be darker or not as dark or not as broken up, it doesn't mean that it's bad, it just means it's different. So keep that in mind. Even though this is an extremely biased test, I still want to test it and see how it sounds because, well, no one's really ever done it. So anyways, even though it is biased, I do want to point that out so that when we're listening to the tone test, we can be active viewers. Anyways, back to the tone test. And before I begin the tone test, I do want to say it's been a long time since I played electric guitar. Ever since graduating from lead electric to rhythm acoustic, I haven't had the opportunity to play my electric as much as I wanted to. So that's why my pedal board's a bit of a jumble mess and my skills really aren't where they used to be. So bear with me a little bit. But that being said, I think I'm able to put together some chords, but just bear with me. I'm a little rusty. You're not going to see any sort of Van Halen shredding. If you're hoping to see that, I'm certain other musicians are more than capable of doing that, but this musician is not. So I think you heard from those tone tests that the Simplifier holds its own, but the really cool thing about the Simplifier is not just it sounds really good, it doesn't just have XLR outs, it's also a stereo. Now, this big boy, this is my Fender amp that I'm going to be using. It is the Fender Studio Lead. It's a solid state Fender amp that can do, well, the Fender clean thing. I think it'd be really fun if I mic'd this up with an SM57 and then played my Vox with the Fender in stereo and see how that sounded compared to the Simplifier, also set to a Vox and a Fender setting. And I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised with Simplifier. It actually does a pretty good job at comparing directly to a Vox AC15, and I wasn't really expecting that at all. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Would you give up your amp for an amp sim? I know in the world of increasingly need to be quieter and quieter, this does a really cool job, and it might just find its way onto my pedal board as my main rig whenever I get a chance to use it. So it certainly beats lugging around this 50-pound giant. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I will see you in the next video, and take it easy, bud. There we go, nice and clean.